We can trace the rapid expansion of the Ottoman Empire on this map of the 16th century Mediterranean basin. From a small foothold in Anatolia, Ottoman borders expanded until they reached the gates of Vienna in Europe, stretched across the Middle East into Asia, and pushed deep into Yemen and North Africa. It successfully spanned 3 continents. That geographic scale trapped a dense, diverse population inside those borders. Subjects spoke dozens of entirely different languages. They were Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Jews, Shia Muslims, and Sunni Muslims, all forced to live under a single sovereign authority. History showed that when an empire absorbs this much diversity this quickly, the friction usually leads to a rapid fracture. From the Mongol partitions to the disintegration of the Roman West, a lack of shared identity among millions of people had almost always been a precursor to a state's collapse. The Ottomans defied that pattern. They maintained control over this massive, volatile territory for more than 600 years, largely avoiding the catastrophic internal fragmentation that doomed their regional predecessors. Their long survival relied on a highly pragmatic administrative blueprint, one designed to make local compliance much easier than rebellion. The initial momentum of the empire relied heavily on aggressive military conquest. The Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453, ending the Byzantine era, and by 1517 they marched into Cairo to defeat the Mamluk Sultanate. These victories were fueled by strict discipline and elite military units like the Janissaries, a highly trained infantry vanguard that dominated the battlefields of Europe and the Middle East. But conquest is only a one-time military victory. Governing conquered territory requires permanent garrisons and endless supply lines, a drain on resources that becomes unsustainable when trying to manage a population of millions across 3 continents. As the dust settled on their victories, the Ottoman rulers faced an immediate bureaucratic crisis. They suddenly had to govern millions of new subjects who did not speak Turkish and did not practice Islam. Their solution was an administrative framework called the millet. Instead of organizing new subjects by ethnic background or the specific territory they lived in, the Ottoman state categorized people strictly by their religion. We can see how this legal pluralism functioned on this organizational chart. The central Ottoman authority branches out into parallel legal pathways. The state granted Christian and Jewish communities the autonomy to run their own affairs. They maintained their own local courts, elected their own community leaders, and managed personal status laws, like marriage and inheritance, according to their own religious texts. This autonomy was entirely transactional. In exchange for the right to govern themselves without interference, these non-Muslim communities paid a specific poll tax and swore political loyalty to the Ottoman state. While European states in the 16th century were frequently executing heretics and enforcing strict religious assimilation, the Ottomans deliberately avoided it. They recognized that forcing millions of Christians and Jews to adopt Islamic law would require endless, costly military enforcement. By protecting local customs, the millet system acted as a release valve for social friction. It removed the primary reasons a conquered people might rebel, securing internal harmony at a fraction of the cost of occupation. Keeping non-Muslims pacified solved one administrative hurdle. The state still had to maintain authority over a massive, geographically scattered Islamic population. Following the conquest of Egypt in 1517, the Ottoman Sultan claimed the title of Caliph. This gave Istanbul physical control of Mecca and Medina, establishing the Sultan as the supreme spiritual leader of the Sunni Muslim world. That religious title functioned as a long-range geopolitical weapon. A sultan could enforce secular laws within his borders, but a caliph could demand religious allegiance from Muslims living hundreds of miles outside Ottoman territory. As European empires expanded their colonies into India and North Africa, they found themselves ruling over millions of Muslims. The Ottomans used this dynamic as a strategic deterrent. The underlying threat was clear. An attack on Ottoman soil could prompt the caliph to trigger uprisings deep inside British, French, or Russian colonies. By the mid-19th century, that defensive posture began to crumble. The empire had accumulated massive public debt to European banks, and Western imperialism was steadily carving away Ottoman territory. Facing financial ruin and military decline, the Ottoman leadership launched the Tanzimat reforms. Seeking to emulate the centralized states of Western Europe, they dismantled the exact system that had maintained their internal peace. They stripped away the autonomy of the millets in an attempt to force a single, uniform Ottoman national identity. Forcing distinct religious communities to abandon their traditional self-governance achieved the opposite of its intended goal. Stripped of their local control, minority groups quickly embraced aggressive ethnic nationalism, tearing the state apart from the inside. When the Ottoman Empire entered World War I against the Entente powers, the Sultan attempted to deploy his spiritual authority one last time. In 1914, he issued a formal declaration of global jihad, calling on Muslims worldwide to rise up against British, French, and Russian forces. The global uprising never materialized. Arab populations in the Hejaz revolted against Ottoman rule instead. The unifying power of the caliphate had eroded, leaving a fractured empire exposed to military defeat. The victorious allies partitioned the Arab provinces into European mandates, and in 1924, the newly formed Turkish government moved to end the old order. President Mustafa Kemal Ataturk formally abolished the imperial structures, establishing a secular republic and sending the final caliph into exile. The geopolitical vacuum created by that collapse was quickly filled by European mandates, laying down the borders, the nations, and the localized conflicts that define the modern Middle East today. The Ottomans proved over 6 centuries that uniting a vast, diverse geography requires pragmatic tolerance and decentralized authority. The moment they abandoned that flexibility and tried to force rigid conformity, they set their own ruin in motion.